He was a collector until the doll collected him. Welcome to my channel, Midnight Story Hub. Tonight, we bring you a tale of obsession, fear, and a curse that refuses to let go. A collector's newest treasure isn't just a doll, it's a trap. Beware, because once you meet the Dollmaker's creation, there's no turning back. It had been a long day when Thomas arrived at the auction house. The rain-slicked streets reflected the dim orange glow of street lamps, giving the world a distorted, almost dreamlike quality. Thomas was a collector, not just of ordinary antiques, but of things that carried whispers of history, of lives once lived and long forgotten. He had been drawn to an unassuming catalog item, a small wooden doll, no bigger than a foot, in a faded porcelain dress. Its eyes were glossy and unsettlingly lifelike, staring directly at the reader through the printed page. The catalog warned, almost as if apologizing, that the doll had come from the collection of an infamous dollmaker whose life had ended in mystery decades ago. The description intrigued him. For those who dare. Owned and crafted by Edmund Hallow, the Dollmaker. Rare, fragile, haunted, some say. Thomas was never one to shy away from a little mystery. The auction hall smelled of varnish, dust, and old wood. Rows of tables displayed their treasures under bright, sterile lights, but Thomas barely noticed anything else. He approached the table where the doll had been placed and felt a chill brush down his spine. The doll's eyes seemed to follow him, and he found himself moving a hand, almost involuntarily, to adjust its stance. Its painted lips curved in a faint, unnatural smile. The auctioneer's gavel slammed. Thomas bid without hesitation, winning the lot. He packed the doll carefully and drove home through the misty night, each windshield wiper swipe revealing another shadow in the streetlights. By the time he reached his apartment, the doll sat upright in the passenger seat, staring silently. Thomas laughed nervously, but the chuckle didn't reach his eyes. Something about the doll unnerved him in the days that followed. Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The doll remained on a shelf in his living room, yet occasionally he could have sworn it was slightly turned from the last time he'd seen it. He would enter the room, only to find it facing the corner, its glossy eyes glinting under the lamp's warm light. He chalked it up to his imagination after all. Collectors like him spent a lot of time alone, surrounded by lifeless things, but things escalated. One night, he awoke to the faint sound of capping wood against wood. His apartment was silent, except for the rain on the windows. The doll was no longer on the shelf. It was sitting at the edge of his bed, legs dangling over the side, smiling as though it had been there all along. Thomas froze, his heart thudding. He rubbed his eyes, blinked. The doll was still there. He reached out to pick it up, but it fell silently back onto the floor, landing upright, still smiling, still watching. That night, Thomas barely slept. Shadows in his room seemed deeper, almost moving on their own. And the next morning, he noticed something terrifying. The doll's position had changed again, closer to his desk, facing him directly. Days turned into nights, and Thomas found himself obsessed. He would enter a room and immediately check the doll, noting its position, always slightly different. He began to hear whispers, not loud, not coherent, just faint, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to rise and fall with the wind. Occasionally, the whispers seemed to form words. Thomas. Watch, sleep. Mine. Friends began to notice his change. He skipped appointments, stopped returning calls, and spoke to no one, claiming he had work to do. But the truth was darker. He couldn't tear his eyes from the doll, and it was as though it had some invisible tether to him, keeping him awake, anxious, paranoid. One evening, he decided to clean the doll. He placed it on the table under bright light and examined its craftsmanship. The hands were delicate, the face painted with uncanny precision, but the eyes, Those dark, glossy eyes held something deeper, almost human. It was as though Edmund Hallow himself had captured not just an image, but a soul within the porcelain dot. As Thomas polished the doll, he felt a sudden coldness. The room temperature dropped sharply, his breath visible. A soft creaking sound came from the floor. He froze. "Who's there?" He called out, voice trembling. No answer. The doll's head tilted, slowly, deliberately. Its lips seemed to curve wider, in a grin that wasn't there before. Over the next week, the incidents grew worse. Thomas found notes in his handwriting he didn't remember writing. "I must obey. I cannot leave." He would wake to the sound of his own voice, whispering in the dark. Items would move in his apartment drawers opening, objects on tables shifting. And always, the doll was in a new place, closer to him. One night, he awoke to a voice, clear as day. "You belong to me now." He bolted upright, heart racing. The doll was perched on his chest, impossibly heavy, its tiny hands clutching his shirt. The grin was no longer faint. It was wide, terrifyingly human. Thomas screamed. The doll fell, landing on the floor upright. It stared at him. The room was silent again, but the terror lingered. Desperate, Thomas researched Edmund Hallow, the Dollmaker. He discovered that Hallow had been infamous for his obsession with capturing human souls within his dolls, a practice whispered about in dark, forgotten corners of history. Hallow's apprentices vanished, clients disappeared, and some of the dolls he had sold had been known to move on their own. The final entry about Hallow ended abruptly. Hallow died, but the work remains. The curse follows the collector who dares to claim it. Realization hit Thomas with sickening clarity. He was the next collector. As days blurred, Thomas's apartment became a nightmare. The doll seemed to feed off his fear, growing stronger with each whispered word, each panicked heartbeat. Shadows moved with intent. Objects would fly across rooms when he wasn't looking. He couldn't leave, couldn't sleep, and the whispers became clearer. "Obey. Play. Stay. Mine." Thomas tried to burn the doll. He threw it into the fireplace, watching the flames lick its wooden form. Smoke rose, filling the room with a pungent odor of burning paint. And then the unmistakable sound, a tiny, human-like scream, muffled, desperate. He turned away, coughing, and when he looked back, the doll was sitting on his desk, smiling. Panic consumed him. He tried to lock it away in a box, seal it, hide it. Every time it returned, always watching, always closer. And then he heard the door click. Someone entering, or something. The whispers were now coherent. "You cannot leave. Forever mine." Months passed, or maybe only days. Thomas could no longer tell. His apartment was in shambles, filled with overturned furniture, shattered glass, and the ever-present doll staring at him. His reflection in the mirror no longer seemed like him. His friends called, worried, but he never answered. He was trapped in a web of obsession and fear. One evening, Thomas found a journal hidden beneath the apartment floorboards. The pages were yellowed, written in a shaky hand, Edmund Hallow's own account of his craft. The final lines chilled Thomas to the bone. "The soul trapped within my creation will claim its collector. One day, it will sit across from you, whispering your doom, and the work continues." The doll sat on the floor as he read, its glossy eyes reflecting candlelight, alive in a way no toy should ever be. And then it whispered, not in Thomas's voice, not in his own, but in Hallow's. "Welcome, collector. The curse begins." Thomas screamed, and the world went black. When neighbors finally entered the apartment weeks later, it was empty except for the shelf where a new doll sat, smiling, glossy eyes fixed on the doorway. The apartment smelled of dust, paint, and fear. And somewhere, faintly, in the quiet, a whisper echoed, Mine. Forever. The Dollmaker's curse had claimed another soul.